As we know, the Utah Jazz have made a lot of interesting additions to the roster as of late, with Eubanks, Fee, Filipowski, and Juzang all signing official contracts, and then Tavion Kinsey getting dropped in exchange for another two-way player, Oscar Shibwe. That said, there were two interesting pickups last night that made things a little bit confusing when the second one came in, those being one, Babacar Sané, and Patty Mills. Now, Patty Mills has a little bit more of, I guess, a clear-cut guarantee of more so what we can expect from him, considering he also just had an Olympic ball season that went actually really, really good, considering the fact that he only played in 32 games of the past NBA season, and it really didn't go great between the two teams he was on, and so he really needed it. But for Babacar Sané, he really was just looking for a new home because he was playing for the G League Ignite, but they were so bad that they just ended up getting shut down, and the sales weren't great, and it was just a catastrophe to the tune of 2-32 as the record for last year. He spent both seasons so far that he's been a professional player with that squad, and honestly, the numbers were pretty decent. He played in 23 games both times around. This season, we're going to focus on, which was him playing 22 and a half minutes. He had 11 points, shooting 45.6% from the field. He was 25.6% from three-point range on 1.9 attempts, and he wasn't afraid to shoot them. He also shot 68.5% from the free throw line on 2.3 attempts and totaled 5.9 rebounds, half an assist, 1.7 turnovers, half a block, half a steal, and 3.2 personal fouls a game. That said, numbers only tell you a certain part of his game. And after he was selected, I actually had to go look up and watch some film on him because I was not a big G League Ignite kind of guy. Even though I do watch G League games from now and then, it just made sense for me to actually do the due diligence of seeing if this guy's just going to be somebody that's around short term, if he has any promise, or if he's just a random signing that means literally nothing. Because that does happen from time to time when you're a tanking roster. He was signed to an Exhibit 10 contract, and the idea is that a lot of people don't expect him to be around beyond training camp, which I could definitely see. I think that he would more than likely spend most of his time with the SLC Stars because he's looking for a new home, and he does have a lot of potential upside. He is 6'7", 230, so he has a stocky frame. When you watch him play on camera, if you watch any of his highlights, if you literally look up his name in YouTube and just pull up some tape, he looks a lot bigger on camera than he is on paper. Being 6'7", he looked a lot closer to like 6'10", watching him with particularly his play style. He looked like a much more aggressive rim running version of Walker Kessler that wasn't afraid to shoot. Now that 25% from three on about 2 attempts per game was interesting because a lot of the film that I watched had him pump faking from the corner, people actually jumping, and then him blowing by and booming on somebody or getting a smooth little finesse layup, which I found to be a little bit interesting. But overall, he's a good weak side defender, more so from a shot blocking standpoint. He's really athletic. You know, he likes to jump, likes to dunk very aggressively, which I really enjoy because that's something that the Utah Jazz don't really have on their roster. I guess John Collins would be the closest thing we would come to that. And if you're a Colin Sexton fan from a guard perspective, that would be the closest thing you have there. But it was a refreshing change compared to what we've seen from Walker Kessler, because the issue that we have with Kessler rather, is his lack of just dog, so to speak. It just feels like a lot of times he's out there because that's his job, and he's out there kind of timidly. Like his big brother told him that he needs to go do this thing, and so he's doing this thing. And it can come across as not being the most imposing thing, of course, when he's also not the strongest physical specimen and he's not the most athletic. Though he is a very, very good rim protector, the offensive game, we would just like for him to have more confidence. And if there's one thing about Babacar that I would love to take out of him and give to somebody on the roster, it would literally be that offensive competence from a just competitive spirit standpoint, and slap it into Walker Kessler. Because I'm pretty sure if we gave Walker 2 threes a game, he could also shoot 25, 26%. Even after his issues that he had with his elbow at the beginning of last season that I felt kind of trickled through the remainder of the year, but there was no really big official mention of it as the season wore on. I feel like it just makes the most sense that he does end up on our G League team. He is a decently promising player. I don't think he's going to ever be, an all-star caliber player, but I do think that eventually he could be a modest role player. He, at that 6'7", 230, I believe that he could be a 10-6 guy if he gets, 20 to 25-ish minutes off the bench at some point in his career. I think that his shooting touch will have to get better. A lot of things that I saw him do looked good against G League competition. But like I said, if somebody's going to jump out on a closeout against a shooter that shoots 25% from three-point range and literally go flying out of bounds to the point where he can blow by easily, that's not going to be a look that he gets very often at the NBA level. That just doesn't happen. So I am a proponent for him being a G League guy. He's not a main squad kind of guy, in my eyes, at least from what I saw. And of course, I'm always open to being wrong. But when it comes to the Utah Jazz, at least with my predictions from last year, I wasn't too far off. So I'd stand with myself on this decision. With that said, he doesn't push the needle at all. He's just an interesting piece to see how things develop with him, and maybe later on, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, we see something more interesting from him or some extreme jump in promise, particularly from a shooting standpoint, that could make him really interesting because he has the confidence. He just doesn't shoot the ball terrifically well, and players in the G League not paying attention to the fact that he can't shoot a three ball will still close out because his jumper does look pretty fluid. I'm not going to lie. He had a couple one dribble pull-ups and a couple off the catch that really looked silky smooth. And so when I saw the 25% from three, it kind of baffled me, the fact that he had so many attempts where he would literally just pump fake. Not a strong pump fake, just a up to the eyebrow, drop the hands, and somebody's literally flying out of bounds past him. But it made for a good highlight tape, and, that gets a lot of guys paid these days. Moving on to Patty Mills, though. This move really confused me because in my head, the reason why Colin Sexton hasn't been in any trade rumors or anything like that is because he was supposed to lead that next guard class up that got brought in. Obviously, you have your Isaiah Collier, who has a very similar-ish playstyle to Colin Sexton. He's obviously not as athletic, but he does have issues with his turnover proneness versus his ability to properly see the floor and pass the ball to the open guy. Colin really improved in that aspect. Specifically last year, we watched it in real time over the course of 30, 40 games where he got really, really good at it. So I thought that he was going to be the ideal teacher for Collier specifically. I don't think Keontae George will reach a point where he is a bona fide point guard. I think that it would be a lot easier to slot him into the two guard spot and have him work mildly on playmaking abilities, but not make that a defining character trait of him. Because last year, he tried to do that, and he also tried to shoot the ball well, and neither of those things could consistently happen. He had a couple spark games where it was like, man, he's taking all the right shots, and they just wouldn't go in. So for that reason, I think that it's easier to get those shots to fall rather than teaching a guy how to read the floor properly and get the ball where it needs to go, especially when his entire college career, that was not what he was predicated on doing. Isaiah Collier was more so in the zone of doing that, but he was very turnover prone. I think that Will Hardy has the ability to cut down on those turnovers and make the game simpler for Collier. Admittedly, he's not going to get the start out the gate, obviously, but with the team tanking this year, it's going to be good for him to get some quality reps. I do see him playing upwards of 20, 25 minutes a game, depending on injuries and who's available just on a night-to-night basis. But I do feel like this Patty Mills thing kind of convolutes things just a tad, because I don't know how Patty leads into this. For reference, those that aren't very familiar with his game, he's most known for his time on the Spurs, where he spent literally the majority of his career until recently going to the Brooklyn Nets, then Atlanta and Miami last year, where he totaled 32 games, started in 5 of them. He had 13 minutes of action per game, averaged 4 points, 1.1 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 0.6 steals, no blocks. He shot 35% for the field on 4.1 attempts, and he shot 27.6% from 3 on 2.7 attempts. I don't use that as being very indicative of who he is as a player, because those were very small stretches, and he's a guy that you can play for a stronger duration and rely on him to be a solid floor general. Defensively, obviously, he doesn't have the same athleticism and just quick-footedness, being as fleet of foot as he was when he was a younger dog, but he is a good leader, and I believe that he will be important in embracing and leading this next charge of guards, and I believe that he can create a level of defensive intensity and understanding of the game for the young guys that will be necessary. Now, honestly, I would love to put him in the Udonis Haslem role that the Miami Heat had. Can he play some minutes here and there? Yes, absolutely. But I think that his mentorship and his knowledge and the understanding of the game that he has would be the most impactful aspect that he has. Because the goal of this upcoming season is to be bad. It's to develop the young guys, see what they're capable of doing, see and create a plan for what they can do later on down the road, and be a not really good team. Now, I do think at the very beginning of the season, you're going to see the usual come out the gates, hurrah, we're going to punch it, foot on the gas, mashing that thing. We're going to try and see what we can do, see what we have. And then as the season trickles on, we're going to be like, okay, either A, we're going to win too many games to start out, and they're going to say, all right, let's dial it back a bit. Or B, we're going to have an injury, or they're just going to decide, let's swap it, and we're going to get some more of these young guys in here. I will be doing a separate video talking about what I think they're going to do directionally as far as minutes go, because this has been an interesting week and a half ever since Lauri Markkanen ended up signing his extension on the 7th. Things have gotten really confusing, but I hope that I did my best to, at the very least, report to you guys on who got brought in and what their strengths or weaknesses are and what I believe their role could potentially be on this particular year, at the very least, of the Utah Jazz roster. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. Go ahead and drop your thoughts below. What role do you think that Patty Mills specifically is going to play? And do you think that Babacar Sané, if you've seen his tape before, or if you plan on seeing his tape, what role could he end up playing later on down the road? Whether it be with the SLC Stars, or if he works his way up and develops his game to be onto the main roster. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member or drop a donation to help support the content. With that being said, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.